Welcome all to the Unitarian Universalists of Transylvania County. We're recording this part of the sermon today on the vernal equinox, the first day of spring. Today, we illustrate very clearly a reading that you heard in entirety a few weeks ago in a Sunday service by the Reverend Margaret Weiss, called "The Church Has Left the Building." Reverend Weiss reminded us that the church is not walls built stone upon stone, held together by mortar. It is one person linked with another person, all ages and genders and abilities held together in community, built on the foundation of reason, faith, and love. I'm Vanessa Cowie, together with Janice Cannon, we are service coordinators for today. Thank you for joining us in this sacred place, this community consecrated by our presence, virtual and physical, and our commitment. We are a welcoming and inclusive congregation. We invite your participation without regard to race, age, color, sex, gender orientation, abilities, politics, or income. We require no creed or particular religious belief, asking only that you come with goodwill and an open heart. To any guests or newcomers we have with us today, thank you for taking a chance on us and taking the time to find us online and join us for worship. And to our members and friends, please use the chat function to commune with each other.
Hello, I'm Janice Cannon. We are so pleased that we had the opportunity to do the videos you will see in this service at Happy Hollow in Transylvania County on the vernal equinox, emerging from winter and the first glimpses of light at the end of the tunnel of quarantine. This was a wild place and a wild time. I use the word wild here in the way Clarissa Pinkola Estes used it in Women Who Run with the Wolves, not in the sense of being out of control, but in its original sense, which means to live a natural life in which the creature has innate integrity and healthy boundaries. This kind of wild woman connects with the rhythms of life through her own heart. We women are powerful beings, especially as we age, not powerful in the patriarchal paradigm, but powerful in the sense that we are more authentic, more real, more truthful, and more beautiful. And powerful as the wise woman, the woman that embodies the crone energy. The crone is the woman who no longer sees herself only in relation to others, but as a woman unto herself, a woman who stands alone in the center of her beingness, in the center of her own truth, and from this center relates to the people in her life from what is real for her. Coming from this center, powerful women will speak up to injustice. We will easily transition from oppressive cultural forces, and we will be open to inclusion of all humanity. And we will dance, and we will sing to the universe who we are. We met with the women of UUTC and friends from the community to celebrate the power of women and to be in each other's presence for the first time in a year. Courage starts with showing up and being willing to be seen. Join us as we draw the circle wide.
Draw the circle, draw the circle wide. Draw the circle, draw the circle wide. No one stands alone, we'll stand side by side. Draw the the circle, draw the circle wide.
We open with words from Annie Dillard, reading number 420 in our Singing the Living Tradition hymnal. We are here to abet creation and be witness to it, to notice each other's beautiful face and complex nature so that creation need not play to an empty house. Our opening hymn is number 196, Singer of Life.
Singer of life, all flowers are songs, with petals do you write. Singer of life, you color the earth, casting the eye with birds red and bright. Joy is for us, the flowers are spread, singing is our delight. Mortal are we with all living things, with eagles in the sky. Even a golden jade will not last, singing alone I know cannot die. Here in this house of springtime bestow songs that like birds can fly.
Moving more deeply into our service, we light the chalice, symbol of Unitarian Universalism. These words are from the UUA's worship web collection online. They're shared by the Reverend Jamie A. Yandel, a UU board-certified hospice minister working in upstate South Carolina. We light this flame to ignite the sacred power of justice. We light this flame so that it may be a beacon of hope in moments of fear, uncertainty, anxiety, and the unknown. We light this flame and are emboldened by its blaze, knowing our strength as a prophetic and powerful people is rooted in the diverse ways we answer the call to love. Our worship theme for April is becoming. Today, we celebrate women coming into their mature, sacred, justice-seeking, multidimensional power. We speak of standing in our hearts. Note that the root word for courage is heart. Jean Shinoda Boland's book, Crones Don't Whine, refers to the wise elder aspect of the ancient triple goddess as in maiden, mother, crone. Boland writes, to aspire to be a crone is to want the psychological and spiritual growth that she symbolizes. The crone is an archetype and inner potential that we grow into becoming. A crone is a woman who has found her voice. She knows that silence is consent. Joan Borisenko explored the biological, psychological, and spiritual roots of the crone using both medical and colloquial terms. In A Woman's Book of Life, she writes, the modern woman in midlife possesses a sort of
fierce power that is biologically mediated by a relative increase in testosterone levels that occurs as estrogen levels diminish just before menopause. Ballsy behavior is supported by ballsy hormones. Tolerance for truth, untruth, injustice, and disrespect for the rights of others becomes correspondingly low. Sue Monk Kidd chronicles her journey through religion, pilgrimage, study, ritual, dream work to find affirmation of feminine spiritual power in the dance of the dissident daughter. After years of this work, she wrote, "Whenever I have struggled, doubted, wondered, someone or something would always appear, a friend, a stranger, a figure in a dream, a book, an experience, some shining part of nature, and remind me that this thing I was undertaking is holy to the core. I would learn again that it is all right for women to follow the wisdom in their souls, to name their truth, to embrace the sacred feminine, that there is undreamed voice, strength, and power in us." These three quotations illustrate that the experience of becoming, of standing in the heart, is as different in every person as are those beautiful faces and complex natures Annie Dillard cited in our opening words. This morning we have two particular examples from two powerful women in our own UUTC community, Krista Moore and Alice Wellborn.
I'm Krista Moore, and I'm going to begin with a quote by Clarissa Pinkola Estes from her book, Women Who Run with Wolves. Quote, "The true vision of the wise woman is one of bounty of love and age and wisdom. As she gathers years like the ancient tree, she grows ever more arms, ever more flowers and fruits. She is more rooted, more vast, more sheltering, developing her callings to be throughout life, maiden, mother, crone, elder, healer, teacher, artist, knowing woman." End quote. I know that wisdom does not always come with age. It can happen earlier or not at all. Some of the research on wisdom focuses on three areas that are essential to be wise: cognitive, reflective, and affective. The cognitive area considers how a deeper understanding of life adds to wisdom. The ability to put events in perspective, to understand the greater scope of an event, and to put it in the broader context. The reflective area includes self-reflection and insight. It enables us to view something from multiple perspectives rather than just our own. You must reduce your own subjectivity, your own projections, your self-centeredness, and increase your understanding of the motivations and purposes of other persons. And the affective area is based on compassion for others and a reduction of negative emotions or indifference to others. I was fortunate to have a grandmother who was truly wise. She was born in 1890. She was financially poor and a mother of 7, 2 of whom died before they reached adulthood. She was tough, religious, and wise. In the 1970s, when some of her grandchildren were living in sin and their parents, her sons, had disowned them, she welcomed the sinful couples into her home. When one of her sons asked her how she could do this, she simply said, "Nothing will separate me from those I love." Although living with another person out of wedlock was not part of her moral beliefs, she was able to put it in perspective, look beyond her own views, understand the feelings of her grandchildren, and be compassionate towards them. And she did this at the age of 85. So while I know that all women don't become wise, I was fortunate to have a role model of one who did, to see what it was like to be a woman who was more sheltering, more rooted, and who provided a safe place for younger women and men to explore, experience, make mistakes, and grow.
Like most women, I've had different kinds of power as I've walked through the seasons of my life. Each season has required a different focus and a different energy. Growing up, I was allowed autonomy and independence. I was allowed to explore and make mistakes and learn my own lessons. My parents gave me the gift of self-esteem, which is the gift of power. As a young woman, I discovered that women have sexual power, a dangerous power that can bring joy, but can also bring sorrow and confusion. In my 30s and 40s, I got married, raised a family, and made a home. My power was focused inward on my home and my family. I chose to give my power away to others to make them stronger. And it was the joy of my life. I wouldn't give back 1 minute of it. In my 50s, I went through menopause, my kids started leaving home, I went back to work full-time, and my marriage ended, in that order. My power went outward, into the world, into strength and accomplishment. It felt good. That making nice part of being a woman disappeared, and I found it was much easier to speak my truth and be myself without apology. I ended up in a leadership role at my job, and then when I retired, the Democratic Party asked me to run for the school board. The prospect of political power was exciting, not scary at all. I won and served for 4 years as an elected official in Transylvania County. There's power in that, but mostly I felt incredible responsibility and a lot of stress. And then I ran again and lost, with grace, I hope, but with relief as well as regret. And now, post-school board, I've been a hot commodity in the world of community service, with more leadership opportunities than I can possibly take on. It's the best compliment I could ask for, but I don't need to prove anything to anybody anymore. To everything there is a season and a time for every purpose under heaven. Thank you.
Thank you, Krista and Alice, for sharing your perspectives on becoming. Cycle of life ritually holds our collective joys, sorrows, and concerns in loving community. I invite you to share your personal passages by using the chat function, if available, and although I cannot read the comments, I will light a candle in their honor. I'm going to start with 2 candles for our UUTC mission. The first one is for that part of our mission that supports our individual spiritual journeys, that supports becoming, coming into our personal spiritual power. And the second one is for the second part of our mission, for the courage to use our power to promote social, economic, and environmental justice. This candle is for the losses we've endured over the course of the pandemic that continues to keep us physically apart for our safety. And this one is for the joy in beginning to return to each other in body as well as in mind and spirit. I light a candle to honor the inspiration and support each of us has received from women in our lives, whether they were personally known or unknown, mentors, teachers, healers, sustainers, and to honor the power of the feminine in each of us. And finally, I'll light a candle, a twofold candle, for the joys and concerns that have been shared this morning as we appear online, and one final candle also for all the joys and concerns that remain unspoken at this time. Let us hold all our brimming hearts in love, in the spirit of prayer, meditation, or simply being quiet in this unique and powerful moment. We recognize that justice and love are not mutually exclusive. They are both part of the Creator of life. We affirm that justice and love meet first in God, in the divine presence, and then in our world, where wrongs are righted and the effects of wrongdoing are healed. Acting in discernment, integrity, and will, grounded in our hearts, may we increasingly unite to bring about the needed changes, and we will restore ourselves through unity with all there is.
The Lord is my shepherd. I have all I need. She makes me lie down in green meadows. Beside the still waters she will lead. She restores my soul. She rights my wrongs. She leads me in the path of good things. She fills my heart with songs. Even though I walk through a dark and dreary land, there is nothing that can shake me. She has said she won't forsake me. I'm in her hand. She sets a table before me in the presence of my foes. She anoints my head with oil, and my cup overflows. Surely goodness and kindness will follow me all the days of my life, and I will live in her house forever, forever and ever. Glory be to our Mother and Daughter and to the Holy of Holies, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen.
Like poetry, like dreams, music can distill experience and thought into concentrated communication. What you'll hear next was that lightning bolt of inspiration that sparked this entire service. listen, and I invite you to be moved by the power of warrior. A native of Western North Carolina, the Reverend Carter Heyward is a feminist liberation theologian, priest, and author, whom we are fortunate to count as part of our UUTC family. In 1974, she was one of the Philadelphia 11 women who became ordained in the Episcopal Church 2 years before it explicitly affirmed and authorized the ordination of women into the priesthood. Through this courageous act, Wikipedia and thus the world knows Reverend Carter to this day. However, her becoming continues. Here in our community, she founded the Free Rein Center for Therapeutic Horseback Riding, and she is chair of the Religious Affairs Committee of the local NAACP, the Reverend Carter Heyward.
Good morning. I want to thank Janice and Vanessa and RK and the whole team of people making this possible. Catherine, Bob, and others who are making this possible this morning, and all the wonderful women who marched in the warrior music and the drumming. This has been a great celebration already, and it could stand on its own without this sermon, I can tell you, but here I am to preach. So here we go. I'm an older woman now, and I will heed my own cries, and I will a fierce warrior be, till not another woman dies. I can and will fight, I can and will a warrior be. It is my nature and my teaching. It is the womanhood in me. It is my teaching and my duty. It is the sisterhood in me. On July the 29th, 1974, 11 women ranging in age from 79 to 28 were ordained as priests by 4 male Episcopal bishops in defiance of the Church's ruling against the ordination of women priests, a question that had been put to study 19 times over 51 years, and always with the same conclusion, that there were no good reasons, biblical, traditional, or pastoral, why women should not be ordained on the same basis as men. The Philadelphia ordination, as it came to be called, brought the Episcopal Church's House of Bishops to an emergency meeting in which these 200 men declared the ordinations to be null and void, a ruling neither we nor our allies in the Church accepted. So we proceeded for the next 2.5 years to work as priests wherever people would have us. Over time, we grew accustomed to being dubbed the irregular women priest, a dubbing we actually began to appreciate, and now we really rejoice in that. But at the time, we were called irregular by those who either rejected our ordination outright or resented us because we had been, in the words of some of our own bishops who had refused to ordain us, disobedient daughters, referring even to those of us women who were in their late 40s or 50s and 79 in the case of one of our sister priests. I myself was honored and privileged to be one of the younger women among the Philadelphia ordinands. I was 28. This was 47 years ago, mind you. When RK and Janice invited me to speak today in this service celebrating women's power, I thought for some time about how to approach a subject, empowering women, that has been central to my life and work for almost half a century. About 3 weeks ago, it occurred to me that the most helpful and maybe interesting angle I could bring to this wonderful celebration would be to tell you some of what the Philadelphia 11, as we became known, did not see clearly, or did not realize very fully at the time we were ordained. In other words, what have we learned over these almost 50 years? Let me first list a few things we did see and know in 1974. Some facts that motivated us women to be ordained and the 4 brave bishops to ordain us, and that caused millions of Episcopalians, other Christians, people of other faith traditions, and many people in general to celebrate the Philadelphia ordination. I can tell you that for several days in early August, this controversial ordination bumped the Watergate scandal and Richard Nixon's impending resignation out of the headlines of some of the major newspapers, not only in the United States, but in other parts of the Anglican world, like London. So what did we see? We saw injustice to women, historic and ongoing everywhere. We saw women's talents and spiritual leadership in other religious and faith communities, such as the UU. And we did hear Episcopalians and others calling for women ministers at all levels of our life together. We saw opportunity. We saw that women, church people, and the larger society were quite ready, thank you, and that a few brave bishops were willing to proceed. We did see the limits of who we were, at least partially: white, middle class, professional, cisgender Christian women in the United States. I might add that some of us were lesbian and some of us were straight. It was a glorious celebration of women's ordination on that great day, celebrating women's power in July 1974. But the limits of who we were, what our lives had taught us, and our joy in all that we did see were blocking our vision, at least partially. So there were things we did not see. In response to some of our critics, folks who wondered on whose authority we had sought ordination, we said the church had taught us lessons it didn't mean for us to hear, about God's love for all, about God being neither male nor female, about obedience to God rather than humanity, about justice-making as God's work in the world, always. This was all true. But it was also true that neither life itself nor the ordination taught us lessons that we were not ready or able to learn at that time. There were certain things we did not see, lessons we would have to learn over time. Lesson 1. We were not simply reformers, regardless of what we intended personally. In 1974, many, including the women priests ourselves, spoke of the ordination of women as a new reformation. But what did we mean by this? Were we out simply to reform the institution, to shift things around a bit and put new people, women, into old roles, a patriarchal priesthood? By analogy, did we think we were simply refurbishing the house, putting in new carpets, installing a new roof, painting the walls, maybe even building a new porch? Or did we imagine something more was happening, something beyond mere reformation? I believe it's fair to say that the 11 women were not of one mind on this, or on many matters of theology, liturgy, and exactly how the church should function going forward. We were all white and well-educated women in classical European American style, but we ranged from more conservative to quite liberal in our theological understandings of what priests do and should do. In any case, possibly a few of the 11, like many other church people who were our allies, understood themselves to be primarily reformers. Others of us, probably most of the 11, and quite a few other church people and former church people, hoped that this irregular ordination would lead to something more radical. Linda Clark, an Episcopal classmate of mine at Union Theological Seminary in New York City and organist for the Philadelphia ordination, stated several years ago that the world cracked open in that ordination. The great image, the world cracked open. Linda Clark did not believe that what she had witnessed was simply a reformation. She and most, if not all, of the 11 women ourselves experienced at least a taste of radical transformation on that July day in 1974, but we simply did not realize at the time how radical a possibility we were, in fact, embodying. This was not to be simply reformation. It was, in Christian language, resurrection, the raising up of something that has been dead. But what had been dead? And what was being raised up? What had been dead for a long time was the church's unequivocal devotion to justice-making. The church's unequivocal devotion to justice-making and genuinely caring for the poor and the marginalized and the outcast as the primary work of the Christian church, more foundational than anything else, including liturgy or church growth. Jesus did not rank love of neighbor beneath the love of God. The two were one, love of God and love of neighbor, inseparable. And the language of sacred love, or liturgy, is secondary to embodied love. That means that liturgies like Sunday services and ordinations are designed to feed and strengthen our abilities and willingness to work for justice. liberate the oppressed, feed the poor, clothe the naked, visit the sick, help one another, and respect and honor our neighbors, ourselves, and the creation all around us. Indeed, good liturgy strengthens us, and it is powerful, and it is sacred, and it is important, but it is not the fundamental work of the people. I suspect none of the 11 had quite fathomed the extent to which the church to which we belonged had long ranked its own precious liturgies above everything else, especially its social justice ministry. If the 11 had really grasped the depths of this disconnect between its mission and its worship, I suspect either we would already have left the church or that we would not have been able to stay in it with much integrity. But did we really see that our ordination was cracking apart the church's priorities and that the coming decades would provide opportunities to correct the church's long-standing confusion about what is most important? I think we didn't at the time, but that we would learn this lesson because we were our grandmother's prayers, because we were our grandmother's dreams, because we were the breath of our ancestors, because we were the Spirit of God. So one lesson we had to learn was that the Philadelphia ordination had not been simply about reforming the ranks of ministry or making surface changes to the church, but rather had signaled more radical transformation of the church's priorities and mission going forward. Lesson 2. A lesson we had to learn over time was that misogyny runs deeper than we could fathom. We would learn that women claiming power is never simply reformation, not in institutions, not in nations, ruled by great numbers of dominant class race and race men like the Christian church, like the United States of America, like most other religions and most nations around the world. One lesson which we women priests, all to varying degrees, have had a hard time learning is that it really doesn't make much difference to anyone whether we're nice or not, smart or not, whether or not we are attractive, however we and others may use a word that is usually very manipulative, or even whether we are wise, because truly empowering women and truly empowered women are not okay in a patriarchal social order. Now, there are always exceptions. In fact, making exceptions, letting some women in, is a strategic ploy that enables men to maintain their control of the institution, their power over women, and their power over the institution. The exceptional woman strengthens rather than challenges misogyny. I want to say that again. The exceptional woman strengthens rather than challenges misogyny. But the movement to empower all women must be stopped within the institution, within the nation. Why do we think the powers that be moved mountains to block passage of the Equal Rights Amendment in the early 1970s? Why do we imagine that Hillary Rodham Clinton, for all her flaws and vulnerabilities, was vilified to an extent unseen in American politics since the vilification of Eleanor Roosevelt by the same forces for the same reasons? Why do we assume that Bernie Sanders was embraced by the left as a curmudgeonly old hero, whereas on the left, Elizabeth Warren was often either trivialized as a lightweight Bernie or denounced as a hard, stone-cold bitch? Whether our personal goal was reformation or a more radical transformation, I am sure that the women ordained in 1974 did not realize the depths of the misogyny that had held us all back and would continue to hold us back and would continue to obstruct the lives of our sisters and mothers and daughters and nieces and friends and other women throughout the church and throughout this nation and world. What did we imagine then, and what do we imagine now, was and is the fundamental force behind the movement against guaranteeing safe, legal abortion and reproductive choice for all women? The so-called Right to Life movement is not basically about the safety of unborn babies. It's about the right of white men to control women's bodies. Those who oppose abortion at all cost are those who stand against women's moral agency. The same people who fight women's right and ability to decide what to do about our bodies, our sexualities, our childbearing, our mothering, and about how to care for our own life and defend our own liberty in a patriarchal world. These are the people who fight women's right to choose, a world in which ruling class men and all men who aspire to be like them continue to this day to believe it is their right, their God-given right, very oftenly, to oversee women's lives, bodies, and choices. Feminists, women and men, have been clear from the beginning that the war against women's right to reproductive freedom, including safe, legal abortion, has never been at root about valuing unborn babies. As Massachusetts former Congressman Barney Frank noted, those legislators most vehemently against abortion seem to believe that life begins at conception and ends at birth. They seem to believe that life begins at conception and ends at birth. Think about that. Or in the words of Flo Kennedy, strong black feminist lawyer, if men could get pregnant, abortion would be a sacrament. If men could get pregnant, abortion would be a sacrament. Ponder that. Barney Frank and Flo Kennedy are not exaggerating in the slightest. They are speaking raw truth that is hard for most of us to hear and to bear because our minds and hearts have been so misshapen by patriarchal logic, manners, and sensibilities. It's important to remember that questions about abortion, including the Supreme Court's 1973 Roe Wade decision, did not interest conservative politicians or conservative evangelical Christians until it became necessary to find another hot-button political issue to replace white supremacy, which, by the early 1970s, appeared to have been a lost cause to the civil rights legislation of the 1960s. Now, as we know, it's not that simple. We'll get to that in a minute. And trying to concoct a strategy beyond the historical efforts to target African Americans, conservative white American Christians and secularists landed on women's rights, including abortion, as their new target. The conservative forces defeated, at least for the time being, the Equal Rights Amendment in 1973, and then along came Roe Wade that same year, a handy new target for the Christian right and the religious right. Let me say it again. The women ordained, empowered in 1974 did not see the depths of the misogyny that would continue to obstruct the lives and imperil the bodies of women and girls of all colors, classes, and cultures throughout this nation and world. The lesson we had to learn was that misogyny runs so deep in and through and all around our life together. Lesson number 3, so does white supremacy. Although the Philadelphia 11 in 1974 believed ourselves to be anti-racist and tried to be, we didn't have a clue how tenacious and undying the structures of white supremacy continued, and to this day continue to be within as well as beyond the churches. Not only our liturgies, but so many of our assumptions about culture, goodness, purity, justice, and beauty reflect deep, historic, and contagious attachments to the whiteness and lightness of all that is most sacred to white Christians. It startles me as a white person in our society and our churches to realize the extent of my white privilege and begin even in my 70s to see more clearly the extent to which this privilege has in many ways shaped my consciousness, my values, and my life. I am certain my 10 sister priests from 1974 would say amen to this, and they would wish to join me in recommitting ourselves to the work of radical social transformation in which our spiritual teachers and mentors include always our Black, Brown, Asian, and Native forerunners and colleagues. We in the Episcopal Church are fortunate beyond words today to have as our presiding bishop Michael Curry, an African American whose strong leadership combines the best of prophetic and pastoral traditions, drawn deep from within wellsprings of his own life as a Black American, as well as a Black Christian man. As for those of us who are white Americans, be we Unitarian Universalists, Episcopalians, or members of other predominantly white churches, we ought not to waste a moment of our spiritual energy fretting in shame or guilt, for neither is an empowering motive. Rather, in John Lewis's words, we should redouble our efforts as people with the passion for justice love to make good trouble. 11 white women, 4 bishops, and thousands of allies, Black, Hispanic, Asian, and Native, made good trouble at the Philadelphia ordination in July 1974. But we have had to move on in time and space, understanding that the call to good trouble for white anti-racist workers is ongoing and ever more urgent in this particular moment when young Black men like George Floyd and Dante Wright are killed by white policemen and white police women every day in the United States for no reason at all except to underscore the power of white supremacy, not only among police, but also in our churches, our government, our various institutions, and our psyches. Coming full circle back to the lesson that we were not simply sparking reformation, but rather resurrection, transformation, and systemic change, we did not see that a danger in the Philadelphia ordination was that we might be asking the wrong question. The question we were raising in our ordination was how we and other women priests yet to come would strengthen the church. I believe we should have been asking whether the church into which we were being ordained was worth strengthening in its present form, whether instead of refurbishing the church's foundations by placing women in the roles of deacons, priests, and bishops, we needed from long before our ordinations to be excavating and rebuilding the foundations of the Christian church so that the people and creatures of the earth can be truly loved, healed, liberated, cared for, and saved by one another and by the sacred spinning through, among, and way beyond us. Now, almost 50 years later, I believe that this is in fact the call of the sacred, the call of God, of Sophia wisdom, of life force, of the spirit of justice love, not only to Episcopal women priests, but to all women and men and siblings of all faith traditions who truly love justice with a passion. It is her call to all people whose creed is compassion and healing and the liberation for all people and creatures in the names of the holy. It is his call to us all to help justice roll down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. It is their call to you and me, whether we are UU, Episcopalians, Jews, Quakers, Buddhists, pagans, atheists. You and I are beckoned to tear down the walls being built either to keep us apart or to keep others out. We are urged to crack open, that is, transform all protocols put in place to make us nice regardless, to mute our voices in the face of injustice, to render us powerless in the presence of violence being done to our sisters and brothers, to appease us with promises of police reform, prison reform, voting reform, and church reform. The prophet Jeremiah noted scornfully that people too often cry, "Peace, peace," when there is no peace. Well, I am calling you, my friends, and I believe you are calling me, to make no peace with any organization or movement that requires us to compromise our authenticity or our integrity, to dull our vision and creativity, or impede our willingness to risk. As Reverend Bob said a week or so ago, only a person who risks is free. Amen to that. And Bob said something else I want to quote here, and it's not clear where he ends and I begin because my notes that I took when he was preaching are unclear. But as I heard him, our fine UU brother noted that the Easter event signaled a radical shift in our lives through which we become weird. We become outcast. We are out of step with others, unaligned with what government and religion may say we're supposed to do or be. We may witness this weirdness in UU history and also Christian history, as well as the history of any nation or culture, whenever people choose the love of God and neighbor over rules, protocols, structures, particular words, and creeds. In bringing this to a close, I want to tell you a brief story about my mother, Mary Ann. She was the queerest person in our family. She was also a moderately conservative white Christian lady. In 1993, she agreed to meet me and my siblings in Washington, D.C. for a gay and lesbian march on Washington. But she had one caveat. She said, I don't want to be marching beside any man in a feather boa. Well, I said, Mom, when you go to March for Justice, you don't get to choose who you march beside. And she relented, and she came on. So we get there, and here we're all milling around the Washington Monument like you do at these marches. And I noticed my mother, who had a camera with her, was off running after some person who had long blonde hair and large bosoms and high-heeled shoes and was dressed in a pink feather boa. And my mother was taking a picture of this person, and she was so excited, and she came running back to me. She said, Carter, look at that beautiful woman. She said, it reminds me of Auntie Mame, is what she said. And I said, Mom, I'm not entirely sure that's a woman. She says, well, I don't care whether he's a woman or she's a man or what he is. She's beautiful. And I thought, there we have it. That's an image. It's just an image of what, as a Christian, I would call the realm of God, of very queer, very weird, very wonderful affirmation of a person's full humanity. The women ordained in 1974 did not see all of this as clearly as we do now. Of course, this is also partly because time has passed, and we have learned more as we've grown up spiritually, not that we're ever fully grown. As the late, great Pete Seeger once quipped at the end of a song he had been teaching us in a concert, by the time we've learned all the words, the song's about over. Maybe that's yet another lesson the 11 women priests ordained in 1974 have had to learn by living. By the time we figure it out, it's done. By the time we figure it out, it'll be done. So I want to close with a kind of my own version of Bobby McFarlane that was so beautifully inspired that inspired our sister warriors to sing in the liberating spirit of the 23rd Psalm. Glory be to our mother and daughter and to the Holy of Holies, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. Amen.
Becoming powerful means recognizing and giving from our abundance. Through its soul-nurturing work, this community empowers women and raises up their voices and those of others who are more vulnerable. And our generosity enables us to continue to support our own sacred journeys and justice seeking in the wider world. Please, seek ways to give from your hearts and hands, as well as from your wallet, as you are able and moved to do so. I extinguish our chalice with closing words from Ursula K. Le Guin. We are volcanoes. When we women offer our experience as our truth, all the maps change. There are new mountains. That's what I want, to hear you erupting. You Mount St. Helenses who don't know the power in you. If we don't tell our truth, who will? Today, the Helper Candle represents all of us evolving into our power with the urgency of knowing we will create a new world. A helper candle that is determined to help. May it be so. There's only one announcement. All the music for today's service comes from Voces Aged, Elder Voices, and appropriately, these strong, beautiful musical voices belong to three wise and powerful women, Janice Cannon, Elaine Shaver, and Carlene Reagan. Please join them and us in singing and celebrating with hymn number 1051, We Are.
For each other's morn, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each other's morn, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings. We are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are mothers of courage and fathers of time. We are daughters of dust and the sons of great visions. We're sisters of mercy and brothers of love. We are